Hello, everyone. I'm Robyn Grable, the founder of Talents Ascend and the Ascend Collective, and your host for Ascending Beyond Barriers. Welcome. Ascending Beyond Barriers is an inspiring podcast dedicated to showcasing the remarkable journeys of small business founders who have faced and overcome significant challenges on their path to success. Each episode delves into the personal stories of entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds, highlighting their unique experiences, struggles, and triumphs. Super excited to welcome Adam Cruz. He is a former pastor turned Silicon Valley design strategist who helped launch thriving churches, led design at Intuit, and contributed to over $115 million in annual recurring revenue. But behind the accolades, he was caught in a cycle of hustle and striving that nearly cost him everything. Out of that journey, he founded the Healed Hustle, where he now helps high achievers align ambition with intention. Adam's message blends strategy, authenticity, and humor, equipping leaders, founders, and mission-driven professionals to build businesses and lives that flourish without burning out. Welcome, Adam. Thank you so much for being here. I so enjoyed. I listened to one of your podcasts a while ago, and I loved it. You were just so energetic and had so many great things to say. I told my producer, I'm like, I have to have him. We have to have this conversation. So thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, Robyn, it's great to meet you and be on this the conversation as well. Appreciate it.
So you started out as a pastor, which is just an honorable profession because, it's probably a thankless one, like a lot of them servant leaders out there. But tell us how you got started being a pastor and then what led you to now doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in kind of what we call behind the scenes a little bit. My parents were a part of sort of a ministry life. And so I was as a young kid. I remember, a lot of my life being spent in ministry environments at churches and youth groups and different things. And saw the reward and the joy of helping others thrive in their life and faith being a huge part of that. And then, as I got older and older, I, tried to figure out like who I was and what I wanted to do. And I was a worship guy, music guy. And so I thought, man, I'd love to serve in any way possible through the lens of music. And so that's kind of what I pursued and wrote songs and became a worship arts pastor for a decade of my life and helped plant a church in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and loved that journey. And yeah, that was kind of my journey into ministry background and growing up and all that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. I didn't grow up going to church, but then when I met my now husband, he was raised Catholic. And so my daughter and I became Catholics to be able to get married to him. And we had the most wonderful church in Little Falls, New Jersey. Father Tom was, just an amazing, amazing man. He would talk to you like a human, like he wasn't preaching at you. He certainly would talk about things in the Bible and all the, all of those things, but he didn't he would always talk to you like you're humans. And we moved away from Jersey and have yet to find that again. It makes me kind of sad, but but it is so important to have that connection, I think. And I miss it somewhat, but I always say too, because I didn't grow up going to church every Sunday and being kind of in that environment. I feel like now as an adult, I can be faithful anywhere I am. I don't need to go into a church building.
Sure.
That's my opinion. Certainly. But, all right. So you go from being a pastor, being a servant leader to working for the big corporation Intuit. So
yeah,
well, how did that come about?
Yeah, it was a bit of a journey to that. Obviously my whole identity was wrapped up in sort of church work and, thought I would do that for the rest of my life, to be honest. And couldn't imagine a world where I wasn't doing that. And to some degree, still to this day, have been on a journey of defining what that even means. But in essence, in 2013, decided to to resign. And then joined my buddy, a partner, in starting a tech company and from scratch. So
Okay.
similar to the way we started a church from scratch, it was a few families of us started this church and grew
Nice.
that. We also started a tech company and grew that. And so
Wow.
it was called Zemi. And we were in the space of helping kids get seen for college outside of grades and test scores, and really transforming the admissions process
That.
into college, and it's still going. So Zemi's still
Hey.
around and growing, and an exciting thing to watch transform the education and college admissions space. So um, I had an amazing opportunity to join the team. Of course, I had no idea who I was and why I should be qualified. So when my friend called and said, "What are you doing?" and I said, "I don't know. I just left my dream job and I'm depressed and sad and scared and don't know who I am anymore." And he's like, creating an invitation to help them bring this idea to life. I thought, I am not the guy for this. Like that's not right for me, and went through a series of conversations to realize this is a pretty wild opportunity, and I would be foolish not to take it. And so I took it, and it changed my life. And so we leaned into that, and built that company through several rounds of venture capital funding
Wow.
and raises, and moved the company to San Francisco. And I did that for several years. And then I wanted to work at scale. And so I started going, what is like, I've been a part of startups my whole life. I love the 0 to 1 journey of being a founder and on the early side of things. And it's hard. It's very hard. But I
Very
also
hard.
was curious, like, what is it like the struggles of scaling something that's got what we call market fit?
Yeah.
How do you scale that and grow that? And so I joined another startup called T Sheets, and within about 3 months, we were acquired by Intuit. And I thought, I'm
Okay.
not going to stay at Intuit for more than 6 months, and ended up staying nearly 7, 8 years. So, leading design teams there. So,
Wow.
a little bit of an untraditional path
Yeah.
into what I do today, and but that's how I got to Intuit.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that success. So before we get into, because I want to spend some time on the healed hustle, but
Yeah.
what would you tell you've been through several startups. What would you tell someone today if they're looking to start a business? What would your advice be?
Yeah. I mean, a
Don't
lot
do it.
of, yeah, don't do it. Yeah. Once you can walk somebody off the cliff of don't do it, then, you know, no, it's funny. A lot of times, a lot of what you do is you try to ask the questions that get people to quit. And if they don't quit, then you're like, okay, you're gonna be dedicated enough to
Right.
try. Um, but yeah, at that point, I would say, most of us fall in love with our solutions, and that's sort of classic entrepreneurship. We're so convinced that we have the answer, and we have a little bit of naivety and arrogance to think that we can, make it happen and bring it to life. Um, but where real success comes, I think, is uh, falling in love with problems.
Mm.
When you fall in love with problems, you're not so obsessed about your solution and trying to
Mm.
make your solution be the only answer, or the way I'm thinking about the solution being the answer to working. When you fall in love with the problem, the solutions now all of a sudden open up, and there's all kinds of options we have in how
Exactly.
we might solve this problem. But when you're fixated on my solution has to work, you're always looking for a problem. You're hunting for a problem. So, my guidance to people early on, and how I try to help people is what is the problem you solve? What
Yeah.
is in their way of solving that problem? And focus more on that in the beginning than anything, and it will lead you to the right questions and hopefully the right solution that works.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And it resonating with me too, because I fell in love with my technology, and like
Yeah.
I knew this was so great, but I don't think it took me a couple of years to figure out the actual problem
Yeah.
we were solving and how we could use our technology. And we're finally there. 7 years in, we're like, we finally figured that out.
Isn't that true? That's so well said, Robyn. 7 years. That's most that's most entrepreneurs. Like, and in 7 years, fortunately, it sounds like it's working, but most people either run out of money within 5 years or their idea never gets traction within 5 years. So
Yeah.
so most people spend too much money and take too long in
Yeah.
trying to get to market. And so I'm really interested in how do you expedite that journey and process for people, um, so that
Yeah.
they're not wasting money and wasting time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which brings us to what you're doing today. You went through this. What I can imagine. I know working in corporate America, the hustle of that. The what we're doing now, and why I left corporate America was to have a purpose again, to really have something that I believed in. It wasn't just a number. So tell us how you came up with the Healed Hustle. I love the name.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately for me, and like probably most of us in entrepreneurship and driven people, I don't know if you're an Enneagram person or even know what that is, but um, Enneagram 3, it's high achievers, sort of driven personalities that want to achieve. Um, One of the things that gets in our way a lot is we can be doing the right what with the wrong why. And when we have the right what with the wrong why, sometimes we can have the wrong what too. But a lot
Yeah,
of times we're mission driven. And so our what
yeah,
is holy and conviction backed, but
yeah,
our why is, we have the wrong why.
mm,
And a lot of times that leads to an unsustainable how. And that's
mm,
when all the problems are start to happen. And for me, honestly, this happened before corporate world. Into it
really,
was oddly, um, a breath of fresh air for us in our journey. But for all of us, it's the same journey. You hit a point, and for me, I hit a point where I couldn't keep going. Back in the ministry world, when I was giving 80, 90 hours a week, working harder than anybody, not necessarily anybody, but in my mind thinking like this
yeah,
is all about how much time and effort I put into it. My identity was tied to it.
yeah,
You can't sustain that. So the question that I often ask is, how do you deal with the unsustainability? And we all deal with it in different ways. For some, it's it manifests in a lot of addictions, drugs or alcohol or pornography, or different forms of different things that we all go to that create the crux to deal with the unsustainability. And so
yeah,
what happens is then you start to diverge, and you're on this mission and you're building something that everybody needs and the world needs, but you're dying personally, suffering personally. And then it starts to manifest in your sleep and in your physical life and then your relational life. And for me, I started to face the end of my marriage, and
mm,
my wife and I had uh, really came to a point where we didn't think we were going to make it, and that it would be best to separate. And
mm,
we decided to fight and to um, commit to the journey that it would take to actually see ourselves on the other side. And it was the most pain I've ever gone through,
yeah,
and the hardest thing I've ever walked through. But
yeah,
but we learned a lot about ourselves, and that was for me the journey that I had to go on as I then went to into another tech company and then into it at scale. Is how do you be a high achiever and sustain? And that journey for me is kind of what led to the Healed Hustle and what I'm writing about now.
yeah. I mean, and it really, you're right. That happens to a lot of people,
Yeah.
and sometimes they don't even realize that it's happening until they're on the edge of the cliff, and they're like,
Yeah.
what happened? How did I get here?"
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So tell us about what you got a sustainability assessment you take entrepreneurs through and founders through. What is that like? What kind of questions do you ask us?
Yeah. A lot of the times You nailed it, Robyn. We don't know we're a mess.
Right?
Like, again, because you got to have a little naivety to even try to be an
Yes.
entrepreneur and go. And, I particularly kept the word hustle in there because I'm not asking people not to hustle. That's not going to be an option. What I'm asking is what is driving your hustle? Why
Mhm.
do you do what you do? And that's often what we need to heal. Most of us have no idea why we actually do what we do.
Yeah.
I met an author one time that said, I'm writing this book to prove to my dad that I have what it takes. And I thought, what a burden to write a
Right?
book through.
Yeah.
But how often all of us are doing that. But we don't have language for it. We don't have words for it. I'm starting this business to prove I have what it takes. I'm making this money so that I can never need from anyone. You realize that the why you're doing what you're doing is actually comes from an unhealed place, and it's not going to often end well. And you wake up tomorrow and there'll be another story of another CEO who can't make it, takes his life, another marriage that falls apart. Like, it's just becoming all too common.
Yeah.
But the problem is none of us know that we're having a problem and we think
Yeah.
we're okay. The classic thing we say is, I'll manage it. I manage everything else. I run a multi-million-dollar company. I can manage my personal life too. And so we deceive ourselves that we can actually, have what it takes to manage all of this. And so the
Yeah.
assessment is really our first chance to just go, how am I actually really doing? How am I really doing in what I call the 7 hidden variables of
Okay.
success? So we have all the metrics that we love, like, our ROIs and our, different growth metrics that we have in sales funnels. And, we do a SWOT analysis on whether our SWOT analysis is even working within our company. You know,
Awesome.
we have all these metrics, but we're not aware of our pace and how
Okay.
fast our life is going. We're not
Yeah.
aware of our belief systems and the negative belief systems that are going on in our mind. We aren't aware of how lonely we actually are and
Mm.
isolated, or how connected we are to the people that we care about most, like our spouse and our kids. So
Yeah.
these things are the things we start to ignore because they have nothing to do with success in the way we've defined it.
Yeah.
And so the assessment starts to help us go, am I doing okay? And if I'm not, am I willing to do anything about it?
Mm. That would be my question too. Are people honest? Like that can be some pretty painful. I've been through enough therapy to know that some of those conversations, even with yourself, can be
Yeah.
pretty painful. Like,
That's why we ignore.
yes.
That's why it's too painful. So most of us
Yeah.
ignore so none of us change until there's enough pain. And that is a human problem. None of us change until there's enough
Yeah.
pain. I hate going to the doctor. I don't ever go to the doctor. I only want to go to the doctor when it's too late and my heart hurts or something hurts. And then I go to the doctor asking, like, what do I got to do? And they're like, you should have done something 20 years ago, not like right now.
Right.
And we get upset or whatever. It's the
Yeah.
same thing in this world. We ignore until there's enough pain. When you get the
Wow.
divorce papers and now there's pain, or I met a guy that had sold 4 companies out in the Bay Area. And I asked him, like, what advice do you have for us? We're getting started. We were in our young 30s, young punks, and trying to learn about all this journey. He said, Adam, just enjoy the journey. He said, I'm on my 4th marriage and all of my kids hate me. And he said, I'd give all of it away to have them back. And I
Wow.
remember I asked him, I said, you should write a book. And he said, nobody would read that book. And I said, isn't that the problem with our society today? Is none of us want to learn from the consequences of those that are going before us that are losing everything. And
Yeah.
they're trying to wave the flag like, look, don't do what we did.
Yeah.
Some don't learn until there's even more pain. And I just started asking, like, who is writing or saying anything about what it takes to actually be high achieving and sustainable in your life and in your personal life and your family life and the things that matter most.
Yeah. It's so true because I mean, I even think about generations too. And like, I've got five grand cherubs, and I think, will they listen to, like, I can tell you what not to do.
Yes.
But will they listen? Because
Right.
everybody thinks, no, I know better. That was 100 years ago when you were my
Yeah.
age. You don't know what it's like. And even
Yes.
in business too, it's like people will say, oh, that's not going to happen to me. I'm going to just keep hustling and hustling and hustling. And I mean, we went through that this year for ourselves. It was like, we were grinding and we were surviving, but we weren't thriving. And it
Mm.
was hard to
Yeah.
say what's wrong. And so I mean, we came to the painful point of saying, all right, we've got 2 months, and if we can't turn this around, if we can't figure out what is wrong, what our pain is, and fix it, we have to close. So
Yeah.
fortunately we did, and we're turning things around, so I'm grateful for that. But it is hard to admit there's
Yeah.
something wrong, or that little pain in your knee is, oh, it'll,
Yeah.
I just overworked it yesterday.
Yeah.
It'll get better. But so how do you help people? I mean, the assessment's good. And how do you get them to take the assessment? Because they're probably
Yeah.
saying, I don't need that thing.
Yeah. All of us connect in different ways, but one of the most powerful connection points for humans is story. And
Mm,
I feel like when I share my story and my journey of nearly losing everything and walking through some of the
yeah.
different aspects of our journey, it's an invitation. As Brene Brown talks about vulnerability, you lead with vulnerability, it'll open up vulnerability,
Sure.
and it creates an invitation for people to, maybe I should be taking a look at things. And so I think just telling stories,
Yeah.
and
Good point.
um, and but not every story ends with tragedy.
Sure.
And there are stories out there of those that have figured out how to um, be extremely successful in both business and at home in life,
Yeah.
and in their personal life and in their family life. And so telling those stories and unlocking what they're doing to ensure that they're going to be here. I want to help you continue to do this 10 years from now. And I
Yeah.
hope you're not an article that I'm reading, but
Right.
I hope you're able to tell a story of how did hard work, did hard things, built incredible opportunity for the betterment of the world, lived on mission, and have kids that are also following in those footsteps, and a spouse that's right beside you. So,
Yeah.
um, I think a lot of times we have our story, and that's a good place to start,
Yep.
to invite somebody into, maybe I should take a look at this. And it's okay to not be okay. It's okay if the
Yes.
outcome is, man, I'm
Yes.
not healthy, I'm not
Right.
well, and I need
Yeah.
help. It is
Yes,
okay.
because that's the starting point,
It's
right?
the
That's the
beginning.
that's the healing point of,
Yeah.
once you admit there is something wrong, or yes, I need to go to the doctor for this, and it will get better. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And I think too, people are afraid to be vulnerable, and they shouldn't be, because asking for help is not a weakness. It's
Yeah.
it's courage to ask for help, and find out, especially entrepreneurs, because a lot of the time it's a lonely road sometimes, and it's a up and down, hilled battle. So
Yeah.
really, really cool. Wow. So, well, we just got a couple minutes left. Just give us maybe one of your favorite success stories that you've worked with somebody and kind of turned
Hmm.
them around.
Honestly, one of my favorite success stories, I'll maybe answer a little bit different than maybe what you're asking. One
Okay.
of my favorite success stories is um, a guy named Bill Bales, and Bill Bales owned a company, started a magazine in his 50s called American Cowboy Magazine, and
Wow.
American Cowboy Magazine went on to be a nationally distributed magazine, and it was um, very cool, very successful person. Uh, bought buffalo, like had 100 herd of buffalo, bought a ranch, or did the ranch life, got land, had a mansion in Wyoming, and just lived this neat life, and was a very generous person, and built this little company later in his life, and and Bill was my grandpa. And
Oh,
and so my grandpa was my hero in my life. He was my example of what it looked like to build a successful company. But at his funeral, um, there was several conversations trying to be communicated about my grandpa at the graveside, and through some very intimate conversations with our family, found out that my grandpa had um, had a falling out earlier in his life, and actually ended up spending some time in prison and
wow.
nearly losing everything. I knew none of this until later in my adult life, after my grandfather had passed, and I
Oh,
was sad because I remember thinking, like,
yeah.
I just have questions because I'm
Right?
walking through the darkest time of my life, and all I knew is the sustainable side of it. So, how did you go from losing everything to then doing it totally different?
Yeah.
And so I started to talk to my parents about that, and started to learn more about my grandfather's journey in doing it differently and what it looked like to do it a different way. And so one of my favorite success stories is that my grandpa figured it out,
Yeah.
and my grandma stayed with him through all of the
Wow.
failure and the loss. And it's a beautiful story of redemption.
Yeah.
And I think for all of us, we need to know somewhere inside that redemption's always possible, and that no matter
Yep.
where I am today, I don't have to stay here. And this is where my faith personally, though I'm not
Yeah.
in vocational ministry in a church environment, I still feel like I'm living on mission, and maybe more on mission than I ever
Yeah.
have than when I was in a church, working with people whose identity is still so wrapped up in our work, and our identity comes from our performance and our achievement, and not from um, who God says that I am. And so I want to help people realize there's something deeper going on in who you are, and if you can tap into that, it creates freedom for how you do the rest of what you do, and that will create sustainability when your identity can get healed.
Wow. Okay. Well, you've brought me to tears, so
Mhm.
we're out of time.
Yeah.
Wow. No, seriously, that was very prolific, and I thank you. I needed that message apparently because it really
We
resonated.
all
I love
do.
because we don't talk about sometimes the journey to get to what's been looks like sustainability, and everybody thinks success is just so easy and
Yeah.
life is so easy for some people, and it's not. It's that journey getting there is not always easy, but
Yeah.
redemption is there for everybody. I love that.
Yes.
All right, Adam, thank you so much. I'm literally tearing. I have to get a Kleenex now. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Love talking with you. I just love your journey. Anything we can do to help, please let us know. Thanks for being
Awesome.
on today.
Thank you, Robyn.